The Divine Ones and the Challenge. The Zirath Dominion had ruled the stars for thousands of years. They were not just an empire, they were gods, or so they believed. Their fleets stretched across hundreds of worlds, their warriors crushed entire civilizations, and their technology was unmatched. No species had ever dared to defy them, and lived to tell the tale. The Zirath were tall, golden-skinned beings with glowing eyes and long, flowing robes. They did not see themselves as mere mortals. To them, their power was proof of their divine right to rule. Every conquered race was forced to kneel before them, to worship them as gods, and to accept their rule without question. For centuries, the Zirath had watched humanity grow. At first, humans were weak, scattered across a single blue planet. But then, something changed. Humans did not stay on Earth. They expanded, built colonies, and created powerful fleets. They were different from the other species the Zirath had crushed before. Humans did not break. They adapted. They fought back. Still, the Zirath did not fear them. What could insects do against gods? The Grand Proclamation. On the Zirath homeworld, Elithar, the High Lords gathered in a massive temple made of black stone and shining gold. They stood on a raised platform, looking down upon the galaxy through a vast, shimmering display. The Supreme Lord, Veil-Zor, stepped forward. His voice was like thunder, echoing through the grand halls. "The time has come," he declared. "The humans have spread too far. They forget their place. They dare to challenge our rule." The other High Lords nodded in agreement. Their golden eyes flickered with arrogance. "We have tolerated them long enough," said another lord. "But now they must bow, or be destroyed." The Zirath had never seen humans as a true threat. They had ignored them, believing that one day humanity would accept its fate and kneel, just like every other race before them. But humans had done the unthinkable. They had refused. The Zirath's demands had been clear. Bow before the Dominion. Surrender all human-controlled worlds. Acknowledge the Zirath as divine rulers. But humanity's response was short and simple. "We do not bow." A cold silence had followed. The High Lords had laughed at the audacity. But now, their patience had run out. "Send the message," Veil-Zor ordered. "The humans have one final chance to kneel. If they refuse, we shall erase them from existence." A message was broadcast across the galaxy. Every human colony, every space station, every warship received it. "Kneel before the Zirath Dominion, or be wiped from the stars." The Zirath prepared their fleets. They expected fear. They expected surrender. Instead, they received an answer they never expected. The warship that should not exist. Days later, Zirath's long-range scanners detected something unusual. A single ship had entered their space. It was moving straight toward Elithar, toward their homeworld. The High Lords gathered once more, their expressions a mix of amusement and curiosity. "Is this a joke?" one of them sneered. "A single warship? They send only one." Another chuckled. Zirath war fleets were enormous. Each invasion force contained thousands of ships, enough to turn planets to dust. A single human warship, it was insulting. But as the ship drew closer, their laughter stopped. The U.S. Ragnarok was unlike any human vessel they had ever seen. It was massive, its dark hull pulsing with a strange, unnatural glow. Its movements were silent, almost as if it were watching them. Zirath scanners locked onto it, but something was wrong. "What is this?" "Our systems can't analyze it." The High Lords frowned. That had never happened before. Every enemy ship they had encountered could be scanned, measured, understood. But this one, it was as if it wasn't even there. Veil-Zor narrowed his glowing eyes. "Prepare the fleet. We shall crush this ship and send its wreckage back to Earth as a warning." Their arrogance remained. They were still convinced they were invincible. But in that moment, as the U.S. Ragnarok slowed to a halt above Elithar, the Zirath had no idea what was coming. Their illusion of godhood was about to be shattered forever. First contact. The warnings ignored. The U.S. Ragnarok hovered above Elithar, unmoving, silent, like a predator watching its prey. The massive Zeraf fleet surrounded it, thousands of golden warships, each one larger than an entire city. Their cannons were locked onto the human warship, their energy weapons charged. Inside the Grand Hall of the High Lords, Supreme Lord Veilzor stared at the screen, his golden eyes narrowing. "Why do they not speak?" one of the lords muttered. "Why do they not show fear?" For the first time in thousands of years, there was uncertainty in the chamber. The Zerath had always known their enemies' fear. Every species that had stood against them had begged for mercy before their destruction. But this warship, it did not move. It did not speak. It did not fear. Then suddenly, a transmission came through. The voice was calm, cold, human. "This is Captain Elias Kane of the United Human Fleet. You are trespassing in human-claimed space. You will leave now or face consequences beyond your understanding." The High Lords froze. The words were spoken without emotion, without arrogance, only certainty. Then the Zerath laughed. "Arrogance of the gods. They threaten us," one of the lords scoffed. "Do they not understand who we are?" Veilzor smirked. "Show them." The Zerath battleship, 5 times the size of the human warship, moved forward. Its cannons glowed, charging an energy blast powerful enough to vaporize an entire planet. The message was clear: submit or be erased. A beam of golden fire tore through space, striking the Ragnarok directly. The impact was blinding. Energy rippled across the human ship's dark hull, distorting the void around it. The explosion was massive, blinding, deafening. When the light faded, the High Lords leaned forward, expecting to see wreckage floating in space. Instead, the U.S. Ragnarok remained. No damage, no scratches, nothing. A deathly silence filled the Grand Hall. "Impossible," one lord whispered. "Our weapons can destroy moons." But the warship just floated there, as if the attack had never even happened. Then the human voice returned. "That was your first mistake. The counterattack. 1 shot, 1 kill." Before the Zerath could react, the U.S. Ragnarok fired. 1 shot, 1 single shot. A thin, almost invisible pulse of energy rippled through space. It struck the Zerath battleship dead center. The massive warship, one of the strongest in the Zerath fleet, did not explode. It simply disappeared. No wreckage, no fire, nothing remained. Inside the Grand Hall, the High Lords stared in horror. What just happened? Their most powerful warship had been erased as if it had never existed. The Zerath had never seen a weapon like this before. Veilzor clenched his fists. His arrogance wavered, but he refused to show fear. "Fire everything," he roared. The fury of the Zerath. A futile attack. The entire Zerath fleet opened fire. Thousands of warships launched their full arsenal: energy beams, plasma torpedoes, nuclear warheads. The sky burned as weapons capable of destroying planets rained down on the human ship. For 30 full seconds, the darkness of space turned into a firestorm. When it ended, the Zerath fleets paused. The smoke cleared, and the U.S. Ragnarok was still there, untouched. A chill ran through the Zerath warlords. The High Lords, once so arrogant, felt something they had never felt before: fear. A final warning. The gods are powerless. The human voice returned, still calm, still cold. "This is your final warning. Leave now or be erased." For the first time in thousands of years, the Zerath hesitated. They had never lost a battle before. They had never seen a warship they could not destroy. They had never imagined a power greater than their own. Veilzor's golden skin paled. His hands shook. His mind refused to accept reality. We are gods," he whispered. "Nothing can stand against us." But deep inside, he knew the truth. They were not gods. and humanity was about to prove it. The warship's true power unleashed. The Zirath did not retreat. Their entire empire was built on dominance, on the belief that they were invincible gods. Surrender was unthinkable. Fear was impossible. And yet, something deep inside them whispered, "Run." But Supreme Lord Veilzor crushed that thought. He rose from his throne, his golden eyes burning with fury. "We are the Zirath. We have ruled the stars for millennia. This is nothing but a trick, a deception." His voice shook the grand chamber. The High Lords nodded, clinging to their belief in their own superiority. "Order the full fleet forward. Close in. Destroy them at all costs." The Zirath war machine roared to life. Thousands of golden warships moved as one, forming an unbreakable wall of firepower. They had conquered entire galaxies. This was just another enemy. Or so they thought. The warship moves, and everything changes. For the first time, the U.S. Ragnarok moved. Slowly, deliberately. It glided forward, closing the distance between itself and the Zirath fleet. A ripple of unease spread through the High Lords. It was still silent, still unreadable, still watching. Then the human warship spoke once more. "You were warned." And then the U.S. Ragnarok attacked. A single shot. An entire fleet shatters. No visible weapons. No flashy displays of power. The ship simply hummed, and reality itself seemed to distort. And then, light. A pulse of pure energy expanded outward from the Ragnarok. It did not explode. It did not burn. It simply erased. The first row of Zirath warships vanished instantly, not destroyed, not shattered, but gone, as if they had never existed at all. Panic erupted. Inside the Grand Hall, Veilzor stood frozen, his golden skin turning pale. This is impossible. The Zirath had never encountered a weapon like this. Their ships had shields that could withstand supernova blasts. And yet, against this human warship, they were as fragile as dust. More warships vanished. The pulse expanded. The Zirath screamed in horror as their once mighty armada crumbled like sand in a storm. The High Lords watched in stunned silence. Their gods were powerless. The Zirath's ultimate weapon, their last hope. Desperation crept into Veilzor's voice. "Deploy the Annihilator, now." The Annihilator was the Zirath's ultimate weapon, a planetary destruction cannon, capable of wiping out entire solar systems with a single blast. It was their final, most devastating weapon. It had ended entire civilizations before. If anything could stop the human warship, this was it. From deep within the Zirath homeworld, Ilithar, a massive structure began to rise. A titanic weapon, glowing with golden energy, aimed directly at the U.S. Ragnarok. The High Lords held their breath. This had to work. It had to. The cannon charged. The sky trembled. A blinding light filled the void of space. And then, the Zirath fired. A beam of pure destruction ripped through space, 10 times the size of the largest starship. There was no escape, no possible way for the human warship to survive. The Zirath watched in triumph. And then, the U.S. Ragnarok caught the blast. Power beyond understanding. The Zirath stared in horror as their most powerful weapon did nothing. The warship's dark hull absorbed the energy, bending space itself around it. The light faded. The universe stood still. And then, the human warship fired it back. The same energy, but 10 times stronger, erupted from the U.S. Ragnarok, heading straight for Ilithar. The Zirath screamed. The High Lords collapsed to their knees. They were supposed to be gods. They were supposed to be untouchable. But now, they were watching their own destruction. Their illusion of godhood was gone. The illusion of godhood crumbles. The Zirath dominion, an empire that had ruled the stars for millennia, was falling apart. The U.S. Ragnarok stood motionless in the void, a silent predator. The Zirath's ultimate weapon, the Annihilator, had failed. The power they believed to be unstoppable, the energy they thought could erase entire civilizations, had been turned against them. The counterattack from the Ragnarok struck Elithar's upper atmosphere, but it did not explode. It did not shatter the planet. Instead, the energy unfolded like a ripple, spreading slowly, as if the warship was toying with its prey. From the Grand Hall, Supreme Lord Veilzor and the High Lords watched in terrified silence. The sky of Elithar, once golden and eternal, turned black. The divine planet was being stripped bare. Panic among the gods. The High Lords, once so proud, stumbled back in fear. "This is not possible," one of them whispered. "This cannot be happening." Another lord clenched his fists, shaking his head. "No, we are gods. We cannot be defeated. This is a trick." Veilzor's hands trembled. His golden eyes, once filled with pride, now held horror. For the first time in his long existence, he did not know what to do. The Zirath were losing. They had believed in their divine supremacy for so long that they had never prepared for failure. And now failure was staring them in the face. Across Elithar, panic spread. Priests of the Zirath temples fell to their knees, praying for salvation. Citizens, once loyal and obedient, screamed in terror, realizing their gods were powerless. Warriors of the great Zirath legions dropped their weapons, too afraid to fight. The illusion of immortality, of unstoppable power, had shattered. And in the cold silence of space, the U.S. Ragnarok watched. Humanity's final message. Then, the human voice returned. It was calm, cold, unshaken. "The age of false gods is over." The words echoed through the Grand Hall, through every Zirath warship, across every screen on Elithar. The Zirath had spent centuries demanding worship, submission, fear. Now, they understood fear for the first time. Veilzor fell to his knees, gripping his throne for support. His body shook, his mind unable to accept the truth. The Zirath were not gods. They never were. They were nothing compared to the power before them. Desperation, begging for mercy. For the first time in Zirath history, a Supreme Lord spoke with trembling lips. "Wait." Veilzor's voice cracked. "Please, there must be a negotiation." Another High Lord, his voice filled with terror, added, "We surrender. We offer our empire, our resources. We will serve." The mighty Zirath dominion, which had enslaved countless civilizations, was now begging for its own survival. But the U.S. Ragnarok did not respond. There was no threat, no demands, only silence. And that silence was more terrifying than war. The moment that changed the galaxy. Every Zirath across the empire was watching. Billions of beings, conquerors, warriors, priests, looked to their High Lords, waiting for orders, waiting for salvation. But there were no orders. The High Lords were helpless. For the first time, the Zirath knew true fear. They had ruled through terror, believing they were unstoppable, but now, they were the ones trembling in terror. The U.S. Ragnarok hovered silently, its presence a reminder that the universe had changed, that humanity had changed. The Zirath were no longer gods. They were just another species, watching as the true power of the universe stood before them. The High Lords begged for mercy. The once mighty Zirath dominion had fallen silent. In the Grand Hall of Elithar, Supreme Lord Veilzor and his High Lords knelt, their golden robes torn, their pride shattered. They had never bowed to anyone before. Now, they begged for their survival. Across the empire, panic spread like wildfire. The Zirath, who had once ruled the stars with iron fists, who had demanded worship and obedience, were now powerless. The U.S. Ragnarok still hovered in the void, watching, waiting. It had not fired again. It had not finished them off. But that silence was worse than destruction. because it meant that humanity had already won. A desperate plea. Valzor, the proudest of the Zirath, lowered his head. His voice, once powerful and commanding, was now weak. "We surrender." The words were painful, but he had no choice. Another High Lord, his hands shaking, added, "Please, we will give you anything. Our fleets, our wealth, our knowledge. Just spare us." For thousands of years, the Zirath had demanded submission. Now, they were the ones submitting. The irony was bitter. The great empire that had destroyed worlds, crushed entire civilizations, erased history itself, was now nothing more than a frightened remnant, kneeling before a single warship. And the U.S. Ragnarok had not even taken a single hit. Humanity's answer. For a long moment, there was no response. The Zirath held their breath. Then, finally, the human voice returned. Calm, cold, absolute. "We do not seek conquest." Valzor's head snapped up. His golden eyes widened. "Tell you what?" he stammered. "We will not rule you," the voice continued. "We will not take your empire. We do not need it." The High Lords exchanged stunned glances. They had expected total annihilation. They had expected to be wiped from existence. But this was worse. Humanity did not even consider them worth conquering. To the Zirath, that was the ultimate humiliation, the final warning. The U.S. Ragnarok sent one last message, broadcasted across the entire Zirath Empire. "You will never threaten another species again. If you do, we will return." That was it. No revenge, no conquest, just a warning. And somehow, that was more terrifying than war. Because now, the Zirath understood. Humanity had outgrown them. They were not just another empire. They were something far beyond them. The U.S. Ragnarok slowly turned, its massive form disappearing into the darkness of space. And just like that, it was gone. The new era begins. The Zirath Dominion would never be the same. Their fleets, once the terror of the stars, were silent. Their warriors, once fearless, were shaken. And their people, once proud believers in their own divinity, now lived in fear of something far greater. Across the empire, whispers spread. "The humans, they are beyond us. They did not conquer us because they do not need to. We were never gods. But perhaps they are." The Zirath had once ruled by fear and power. Now they were the ones afraid. And humanity. Humanity had left without looking back. But the universe knew the truth. The age of the Zirath was over. And the age of humanity had begun. Legends are born. The U.S. Ragnarok had disappeared into the void, leaving behind a shattered empire. The Zirath Dominion, once a name that struck fear into entire star systems, now lived in shame and terror. They had believed themselves gods. But humanity had proved them wrong. And now the story of what had happened spread across the galaxy. The whispered fear. At first, many species did not believe it. The Zirath had been unstoppable for thousands of years. How could a single human warship bring them to their knees? But then, the proof came. Zirath fleets that once patrolled the stars vanished from sight. Zirath High Lords, once arrogant and untouchable, no longer gave orders. Zirath citizens whispered in fear, always watching the sky, waiting, hoping never to see the Ragnarok again. The truth was undeniable. And so, across the stars, the whispers began. The Zirath have fallen. Humanity has surpassed them. They are something more. For the first time in history, the Zirath were afraid of the dark. Because somewhere, hidden in the void, the U.S. Ragnarok still existed. And if the Zirath, or any other empire, ever dared to rise again, humanity would return. A galaxy forever change. Other empires watched and waited. The powerful Draith Alliance, the ancient Sovari hierarchy, the silent Selver enclave, All had once seen humanity as just another rising species. But now, they feared them. Because humans had shown something far worse than power. They had shown restraint. They had left the Zirath alive, humiliated, broken. They had not conquered. They had simply proved their superiority and walked away. That meant one thing. Humanity had nothing to fear. Because if they ever chose war, no one would be able to stop them. The legend of the U.S. Ragnarok. The story of the U.S. Ragnarok became a legend. Some called it a warship of the gods. Some called it a destroyer of empires. Some whispered that it wasn't a ship at all, but something far greater. And the Zirath. They never spoke of it again. Their once arrogant empire had become a shadow of its former self, terrified of a return visit. The High Lords, once believers in their own immortality, now ruled with fear in their hearts. They never expanded again. They never conquered another world. They had learned their lesson. The universe was not theirs to rule, and humanity had made sure they would never forget it. A new dawn for humanity. Back on Earth, humanity moved forward. They did not celebrate their victory. They did not gloat. To them, this was not a conquest, not a war. This was simply a message to the entire galaxy. Humanity is not to be underestimated. And so, the U.S. Ragnarok vanished into the darkness once more, its mission complete. Waiting, watching. Because one day, another empire would rise. And when that day came, humanity would be ready.